Welcome to the Boerne Brew here on Boerne Radio, 103.9 FM, along with Kerry Barboza, the sports editor for the Boerne Star newspaper. My name is Roland J. Ruiz. We're very proud to have this week with us the newly retired voice of the San Antonio Spurs, and he's been the voice of so much more Texas sports-wise, the legendary Mr. Bill Schoening. Thanks for joining us.
Very good to be with you again, Roland.
I think when we last left off, you were talking about travel and how good things were when you were traveling, and of course on the road with the Spurs all the time. That's a grueling schedule.
Oh, it is, absolutely. You know, and of course people look at 82 games. It's a lot, 41 on the road, 41 at home. But as I mentioned in the last episode, you know, when you're traveling with a charter, with a team, it's a little bit easier. You know, you don't have to go through the main concourse of the airport. You land, you get off the plane. There's a bus waiting for you that takes you right to the hotel. And then, of course, you get ready for the game the next day. So that's usually the way it works. Sometimes you have a back-to-back where you got to fly after the game. But, yeah, life in the NBA for 24 years for me was pretty good.
I think a lot of people will look at that and not realize how much prep work goes into actually having to do a game. And that's for each and every game. I think sometimes from a distance they'll look at that. No, they show up and, you know, start talking about this and, oh, there's, you know, a Ginobili finger roll or whatever. But they don't realize how much prep work did you actually have to put in, say, to every game? Yeah,
several hours a day for each game, for sure. And most of the work, to be honest with you, Roland, was preparing for the opponent. Because by the third or fourth game, you know your team. And, of course, I've been with the team for so long, I know them anyway. But you see them during training camp. You see them during the preseason. And so you know your team pretty much. It's the other team that you got to prepare for. So that's where most of the prep work goes in. Of course, you still have to update stats and, you know, hometowns and how many years in the league and whatever different accomplishments that guy's had, awards, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. But most of the work is for the opponent, you know, making sure that you know who they are.
If we could briefly review from last week's show, you said you got here to Texas, started working high school in La Mesa, eventually got over to do sports broadcasts at Sam Houston, K-Sam, which was your next stop.
Right.
Talking about visiting with the Sam Houston State football program for a little bit, there were some pretty good players that made the pros out of Sam Houston, as I recall.
Yeah, it's a shame they're having a really tough season. They might be the worst team in college football this year. It's really a shame. There's a number of reasons for that. But when I was there, they were very good. They had moved up from Division II, the old Lone Star Conference, and that was fun. When I first started doing college football, it was Division II, Lone Star Conference, Sam Houston State, and we get in a car and drive to Abilene for Abilene Christian or San Angelo. And anybody that knows the state of Texas knows from Huntsville to San Angelo, it's a little drive there. You know? And Abilene Christian, Howard Payne was in Brownwood, East Texas State was up in Commerce. So it was fun for me to, you know, I was young. I was 24 years old when I first started doing college. So and I learned the state of Texas. That's how I really became pretty good geographically with the state of Texas. But, yeah, Sam Houston State had some really good baseball programs back then. They knocked off Oklahoma in the NCAA tournament in Tisch-Falk Field. One of the first games I got to call at Tisch-Falk Field. I got to see the Sam Houston Bearcats behind Steve Sparks, who's now the color analyst for the Houston Astros, by the way. I saw him shut down a very good Oklahoma team there in Austin. So I've got fond memories of Sam Houston in all three sports, but their football program had moved up to 1AA, actually, while I was there, from Division II to 1AA. And they played, of course, against people like Southwest Texas, which is now Texas State, and Stephen F. Austin. That was their main rivals. But back in the old Lone Star, we drive all over the state of Texas. So they're very fond memories for me.
Oh, Bill, you and I did a football game a couple weeks ago, and I asked you this before the game started. We were sitting in the press box waiting to get going, but I said, who was your favorite Spur? And without hesitation, you said Manu Ginobili. What was it about Manu that made him so special to you?
Everything. There's nothing that's not special about Manu. He's a special person, first of all, great human being, and I watched the way he interacted with fans. And I really admire that because it was authentic. He posed for every picture he could, shook every hand he could, smiled for the cameras. He was great with the fans. And that's one of the reasons why I think he's one of the most beloved Spurs ever. And it's not just the Spurs. It's all around the league. Fans really did appreciate him around the league, especially the fans that came from Latin America or South America and even from Mexico because, of course, he speaks the language so well. So I think that was one of the reasons. Plus, I got to do every game he played. I did not get to do every game Tim Duncan played because I didn't get to the Spurs till 01. Tony, remember that last year went to Charlotte, so I didn't get to call every game of Tony's career either, but I did get to call every game of Manu's career.
I know you keep in contact with him, don't you? Didn't he give you that player's ring that you had in the press box that one day?
Well, actually, what happened was R.C. Buford gave me the ring.
Okay.
But Manu recognized me. I'll never forget this. I had just had my 2000th straight game, and right around that same time was when Manu got elected into the Hall of Fame. Not inducted yet, but elected. And so he had a press conference at the AT&T Center, which it was the AT&T Center at the time. Now, of course, the Frost Bank Center. And I was doing some UTSA baseball, so I made sure that I went to the press conference before I went to the ballpark. And he saw me. And before he said anything about him getting into the Hall of Fame, he recognized me in my 2,000 straight games. And I had to remind him, Manu, this is about you, not me. Thank you. But that's just the kind of guy Manu is.
Yeah, I saw him at a missions game, and Roland does PA at missions games, and so they had a fundraiser for the Hill Country schools, and Manu was there throwing out the first pitch, and he's part of that ownership group. So I was down there on the field, and Manu was down there. He looks lean and muscular. He looks like he could still play.
He does a lot of conditioning. He plays a lot of tennis. He rides a lot of bikes, and he's got those kids, and he's very active with them. So I can't imagine Manu ever getting fat. I mean, I just can't picture it because he's such an active guy. He's kind of wiry. He's built the way he's built, and he stays very, very active.
That is Bill Schoening joining us here on the Boerne Brew. I'm co-host along with Roland J. Ruiz. My name's Kerry Barboza. And what others, we mentioned Manu's your favorite, but what other Spurs have stood out to you, players stood out to you in your 20-plus years there?
Oh, there's so many of them, And, it's funny. I think about recent guys, and I don't know if you guys do this, but I do it every morning once the NBA regular season starts. I kind of look at the box scores of the other games. And one of the box scores I watched last night was the Toronto Raptors. And Sandro Mamukelashvili is now playing for Toronto.
Right.
And over the last couple of years, of course, the Spurs haven't had a lot of winning seasons last few years. They haven't made the playoffs in 6 years in a row. But there's certain guys that make that journey, no matter how many losses you have, to make it better. And to me, Mamu was like that. I don't want to compare Manu to Mamu, but he was just a fun guy to be around. And when he got his opportunities to play, Roland, I think you'll back me up on this, he was really a lot of fun to watch. That's like one of the most modern guys, even though he was kind of a journeyman player, not a star player. But he was real authentic, and I really liked him. And of course, I learned how to say, because he was hitting some threes, right? So I had to learn how to say three in Georgian, because that's where he's from, the Republic of Georgia. And the word for three in Georgian is stummy. So whenever Mamu hit a three, I'd say, that's the Mamu stummy. And I told him one time, I said, Mamu, when you hit a three, I said, that's the Mamu Sami. His eyes lit up. He just loved that, And think about that, from a small country, and just to take the time to learn how to say even one word, they really appreciate that.
Well, I know you told me you took French, and you're kind of fluent in French. Did you talk to Tony and Boris Diaw? Did you talk to those guys in French once in a while?
Now, ich spreche Deutsch. I speak German,
German.
Not French.
Okay. So
yeah. 2 different languages, 2 different countries, as a matter of fact.
You ever talk to Dirk Nowitzki in German?
I think I greeted him in German, Guten Tag. I did take 3 years, and I've forgotten a lot of what I've learned. Oh. But I do remember a little bit, and I like to use it from time to time. My wife just rolls her eyes because she realizes that I'm not that good at it. But we were in Germany one time, and I said, look, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to talk to the waiter in German. And I kind of winked at him. He knew that I wasn't really good. And we got along just great, And I think my wife was slightly impressed until the very end when I asked him where the bathroom was in German, which is Badezimmer. The Badezimmer is actually your home bathroom. In a restaurant, the bathroom is the toilet. It's the public toilet.
Right.
So I said, mein Freund, wo ist deine Badezimmer? Where is your bathroom? He said, at my house. My bathroom's at my house.
And
the toilet. And then the toilet left. He pointed. I said, okay. So he got a big kick out of that, So I said, mine schlecht, my bad. And he just laughed. So we have a good time with that. So, yeah, that's one of the great things about the NBA is that we have so many players from all over the place. I think it's really, and the Spurs are ahead of the curve on this, but I think it's made the NBA much more fun. And from an announcer standpoint, certainly, because it was a challenge, as you know, Roland, as the PA announcer, doing some of those names. I wrote a reggae song, Roland. I wrote a reggae song called Ballers from Istanbul. In 2014, the Spurs played a preseason game against Fenerbahce Ulker, and that was a team based in Istanbul, Turkey. They're still there, very successful European league. And the names are so difficult because they're all Serbs and Croatians and Turks and Greeks. I said, you know what, I'm going to have to really study this. So as I was studying these names, I came up with a little bit of a reggae beat. And so I took it to my producer. We went in, and he had time on his hands for some reason. So he put 34 tracks on this song. He's got all kinds of bells and whistles. He's got a thing called a finger piano. I never heard of that. Anyway, it was kind of a wild song. But on my tombstone, when I die, and I hope it's going to be a few years down the line, but it will say, here lies Bill Schoening, the only guy to have ever written a reggae song about a Turkish basketball team. No one else has done that. Nobody.
Bill, I'm glad that you brought up songwriting as part of your many talents that you share with your audience. You're, of course, mainly known as a sports play-by-play man, but music, songwriting, performing. Do you have any plans for pursuing more music in your immediate future?
Now that I'm semi-retired, I'll probably play a few more gigs, write a few more songs, and maybe try to pitch a few of these songs to other artists. That's probably what I need to do. But I've always loved music. I grew up in Philly, as I mentioned, basically during the period of time when the Philly soul sound was starting to come around, the Gamble and Huff sound, talking about the Delphonics, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, which featured my favorite soul singer ever, Teddy Pendergrass. So bands like Billy Paul, Me and Mrs. Jones, music like that. So that's where I kind of grew up on soul music in Philly. And then as a freshman in high school, I got turned on to a very obscure singer-songwriter from Asbury Park, New Jersey, named Bruce Springsteen. And I used to go see Bruce at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park. I was 17 years old. He was playing the clubs. And I made a prediction to my girlfriend at the time that he was going to make it big. And she goes, "You mean Bruce Bedspring? You think he's going to make it big? Bruce Stringbean?" She made fun of him, right? So anyway, we broke up, not over that, but anyway, but I stayed in touch with her. And years later, 1984, he had that wild tour, Born in the USA tour, where I think he grossed $59 million on the tour. And I'm reading an article in Time and Newsweek, and there's pictures in there. This is back before the days of the internet. So I cut out the articles and mailed them to her. And I said, Denise, in this article, it says that Bruce Bedspring, Stringbean, whatever his name is, made $59 million on this tour. Now, is that making it, or does he have to make $60 million on the tour to make it? So she goes, "All right, touche, he made it. You're right." So anyway, but I was all in the early kind of ground floor of that Springsteen thing, which was pretty cool.
You mentioned Asbury Park. I remember standing on the boardwalk there looking at all the clubs, the Stone Pony and all those right there.
Stone Pony, man, I cut some teeth in there, yeah. The first time I met Bruce was at the Stone Pony. I was 17, I think. And he had 2 albums out at the time. He was recording Born to Run at the time. The first 2 albums didn't do anything. And in fact, the third album was going to be make or break for Bruce. And anyway, I made the stupid question. I said, "Hey, let me ask you, are you making money yet?" And he goes, "Kid, what do you want to do when you grow up, kid? What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a sportscaster." He goes, "Well, go be a sportscaster. Don't worry about the money you're making. Just go be a sportscaster." I had to use that in my mind because the first 10 years of my career, I didn't make much money. But I was doing sports on the radio, so that's what I was doing. And so in a weird kind of way, Bruce gave me some great advice that night.
So as far as the music, because I know you sing, how many different instruments do you play?
I only play acoustic guitar. I'm not a great guitar player. My ability to write music comes from, I've got this kind of a melodic brain. And I don't know if, Roland, if this ever happened to you. Like, I'll be walking down the street, or I'll be swimming in the pool, or taking a hike, and a melody will come to me, without any lyrics, just a melody. And I'll come home and I'll hum the melody on my phone, and then I'll try to write some lyrics to the melody. And I've written or co-written now 35 songs, and a lot of them that way. Some on guitar. There are times where I'll sit down but I'm a G, C, D, A minor. I'm not a real, I can't go up and down the fret. I'm a real basic guitar player, but I've got a really good guitar player friend named Mike Vasquez. So when I need help figuring out chords on a particular song, I'll call Mike, and he'll come over and we'll record it, and then we'll go in the studio and try to figure it out with my producer, Nick Whitworth, who's been great. So I've got, living up here in Austin. Of course, down there in San Antonio, I got a lot of talented musicians too. But living up here, I'm very lucky to have friends that'll help me out and have studios and will help me on songs.
But let me ask you, as far as the music thing, when did it start?
Yeah, well, I've been writing poetry and writing, I guess songs, not even realizing they were songs for a long time. But when I got here to Austin, there was a rule that says, it's like kind of the 11th commandment. Thou shalt get a guitar. You got to get a guitar, So when I first got the guitar, I didn't know what I was doing strumming. I took lessons from a great blues player named Van Wilkes. He's one of the best blues guitar players in Texas and maybe the country. In fact, Billy Gibbons thinks he's one of the best guitar players he's ever played with. Billy Gibbons, of course, from ZZ Top. They're very good friends, and as Van has played with him. So I'm getting guitar lessons from a guy like Van Wilkes. And I'll never forget the first time I had, and Van's not a sports fan at all. He had no idea who I was. I was the voice of the Longhorns at the time. I'm taking guitar lessons from him. And he goes, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a sportscaster." And what do you do? Texas Longhorns. "Oh, I've heard of them." "Yeah, I hope so. You live in Austin. I hope you've heard of the Longhorns." Yeah. So I said, "Well, tonight I'll be on the radio doing a baseball game." I go, "Okay, maybe I'll tune in." So the next lesson I come in, he goes, "Swing and a miss, swing and a miss." So now that was in 1997, right? So I still go see Van. I'll see him hanging at the Saxon or one of the other clubs in town. And every time he sees me, swing and a miss, swing and a miss.
So you mentioned Van, and I know through our conversations in the past, you knew, and I'm assuming got to play a little music with Jimmy LaFave.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy LaFave, and I know that some of the listeners won't be familiar with Jimmy LaFave, but he was a gifted singer-songwriter based in Austin, originally from Oklahoma. And just a real quick funny story about him. Great sense of humor. He passed away in 2017 from cancer. But when I was first learning how to play guitar and write, I would call him. The way we worked this out was he was a big sports fan, so I would get him tickets to games. He was a big Oklahoma State fan. So whenever Oklahoma State played Texas in whatever sport, I would get Jimmy tickets. And then he would let me go to his gigs, right? So I would be on the guest list for his gigs. That's the way we did it. I talked Jimmy into singing a song with me on one of my first records. And he held it against me forever because what he would do, he would recognize me at a gig. And he'd say, ladies and gentlemen, now the voice of the Spurs by this time, the voice of the Spurs, he's wearing one of his rings, girls for $5, he'll let you kiss it, then you can kiss him. He's out in the audience tonight, Bill Schoening, and I ever get a wave, a couple of applause, and he'll say, back in 01, I recorded a song with Bill on one of his records, and he goes, to this day, that is, after 35 years in music, still the low point in my music career. Was singing with him on that song. And he would do it would be the same spiel every time. He wouldn't say, but it would always get a laugh at my expense, So Jimmy and I were really good friends. And he wrote a song about Ricky Williams, by the way. He rewrote the Chuck Berry song, Run, Run, Rudolph, to Run, Run, Ricky. And he played it for me over the phone. I said, why don't you come in the studio and do it tonight? Because I was doing a live radio show with Craig Way. So Channel 24 in Austin came and filmed it. And within 2 days, we had a video of Run, Run, Ricky that was shown on the scoreboard at Memorial Stadium. So Jimmy was a great guy. And another real quick Jimmy story, I played some songs for him over the phone one time. And after I got done, he goes, Bill, I like where you're trying to go with that. So in other words, you're not anywhere close to where you're trying to go. Yeah.
Well, there have been any other musicians in that Austin circle that you've had an opportunity to play with or collaborate?
I haven't had a chance to collaborate with this guy until this last song I wrote. His name is Stephen Vague. He's the best sax player in town, in my opinion. He plays in a band called Extreme Heat that's been around forever. Funk band in town, really, really good. And I asked Steve if he would play on the song because I wrote this R&B song specifically with a sax part in mind. And I heard him play one night. I go, all right, I'm going to ask him if he'll do it. And he did. He came up to Georgetown in the studio and recorded with me. So I just did that one with him. In fact, that's the song. I think, Kerry, I sent you that tune right before we were hooked up on the show today. So it's called Your Phone Won't Be Ringing. A lot of my songs are actually, they're actually about something. This is a song about nothing. It's about a guy that's breaking up with a girl. It's a fictional song, believe me. He's not going to take her call. Your phone won't be ringing. I'm not going to call you. It's a new song I'm singing. A lot of the songs are historically, there's some Spurs rodeo road trip songs, and I think we've written 4 of them. I co-wrote a song with the new play-by-play guy for the Spurs on TV, Jacob Toby. Yeah, Roland, ask him the next time you see him about the rodeo road trip time. We did a song last year called Rodeo Road Trip Time. We co-wrote that one.
And another area of music that I've noticed you posted on social media quite a number of times is you're involved in the music ministry that ministers to the incarcerated.
Yes, I had done that twice now. Kairos is the name of the ministry, and it's not an easy ministry to be part of, to be honest with you, but I've done the music on a couple of them, and you go into a maximum security prison for 4 days, and you talk about God and love and all that, but you don't try to drown them out with that. You just try to be there for them and listen to their story and really kind of just be there for them. And these guys are all serving 25 to life. Some of them aren't getting out at all. And they're surprised when you come in with some food and some music and just try to, some fellowship and not try to shove Jesus down their throat or anything like that. Just try to be a sounding board. And within the first hour of that ministry, and I've been in the prison now twice for 4 days each time, I learned that I was very, very fortunate because each of these guys' stories starts with no dad or mom was a hooker or I grew up on the streets, or when I came home, there was nobody there, or I was raised by a grandmother who was working 3 jobs. I mean, all these things, the lives that start behind the 8 ball. And, I didn't grow up with a lot of money, but I had love in my family. I had support in my family. I had older siblings that cared about me. So that's where the richness in life comes from. It's not necessarily the dollars and cents. If you have love in your family, you have a father who's there and people that care about you from a young age, that's what's important. These people didn't have that. And until I did that ministry to myself, maybe in my own mind, I've got that prejudice thinking, well, why is this guy in jail? Well, the guy never really had a chance. No one showed him how to live. Anyway, so I think that it increased my compassion for sure.
Bill, you mentioned a second ago, you sent me a song the other day about Joe Frazier, Smoking Joe from the 70s.
Speaking of Philly.
Yeah, he was from Philly, and he came out in the Rocky movie, or one of the Rocky movies. But anyway, he fought Muhammad Ali in the 70s. It was fight of the century. That fight was so brutal. They both ended up in the hospital after the fight. But
Ali won 2 of them. The first one was March 8th, 1971, when Frazier won a unanimous decision, and that was originally billed the fight of the century. Joe Frazier was a working-class guy. He grew up in South Carolina, moved to Philly when he was a teenager. When he was the heavyweight champion back in the late 60s, early 70s, the Phillies and the Sixers had just traded Chamberlain, so they were bad. The Phillies are always bad, and the Eagles are horrible. So as a Philadelphia sports fan, you had nobody to cheer for. Oh, wait a minute. We've got the heavyweight champion of the world here. And he was a real common man. You know, he wasn't a big, strong guy, but he was 5'10" and 205. Fighting Ali, who was 6'3", 220, you know, a big difference. So really a tough guy. But I got asked to write a song about him for a documentary. Unfortunately, the documentary never got produced because the producer passed away in a car accident. So I had already written the song. I had not yet gone to the studio to record it. I said, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do this song because I kind of like it. So that's the song I sent you earlier, Kerry. It's called Here Comes Smokin' Joe. And a lot of these songs are on YouTube. So if you want to check out Here Comes Smokin' Joe, you can just put that song title in and with my name, and it'll pop up. My son, Carl, who's doing very, very well in broadcasting, by the way, he produced that video. He does a very good job on that video. He found some old clips and footage of Joe Frazier in there, some vintage stuff, which is really cool.
Well, I was going to ask you because I actually texted you when you said, I listened to it, and then it didn't sound like you. And I texted you back, and I said, was that you singing? And you said yes. So one thing I noticed about you, Bill, is you have this ability to do different type voices. I know you've done Kerry in the booth. You've done Bill Walton. And even this song didn't even sound like you. So how many different voices can you do?
Well, my singing voice is my singing voice. Maybe the credit there goes to the producer who was like tweaking my vocals a little bit, you know. But I used to always imitate. One of the first things I did when I got a Panasonic cassette tape recorder and I was 10 years old was imitate other announcers. And I didn't know Kerry at the time. But the Phillies had a guy named Byram Som. And Byram Som actually was a native Texan, but he spent his entire career in Philadelphia. And Byram Som would sing songs as play-by-play, kind of like this. But he'd also say funny things without meaning it. For instance, well, you know, it looks like it's Art Happy throwing up in the bullpen. Well, wait a minute. Is he throwing up in the bullpen, or is he throwing up in the bullpen? Here's a fly ball to center field. Johnson back. He bangs his head against the fence. He picks it up and throws it into second base. We now have a center fielder without a head, I believe. He banged his head against the fence. He picked it up. And he threw. So Bob would say stuff like, we're in Jerry Park in Montreal. The Phillies are playing the Expos. We love it up here in Montreal. 90% of the people speak French, but they're nice people. How about this one, guys? Here's Felix Beyond. He's a Puerto Rican, but he's a good hitter. What does that mean?
Yeah, a lot of non sequiturs, it sounds like.
yeah. But I love the guy. His play-by-play was actually very, very good, you know. But one time he came on from San Francisco, and he says, good afternoon, boys. This is everybody. So that's the guy I grew up listening to. But you guys know Kerry a lot better. Of course, I've done a lot of Kerry. And the reason I like Kerry so much is because he would not get things right. Well, of course, he had 8 or 9 beers by the 8th inning.
That's true.
Like one time, Andy Bennett from the San Diego Padres was ranked 2nd in the National League in strikeouts. And he's doing the Phillies game. And he says, Steve Carlson, the Phillies, the left-hander, he leads the league in strikeouts. And number 2 on that list is Andy Bennett of South Dakota. No, the SD stands for San Diego, not South Dakota. How about Hector Villanueva, who he called Villanova? You know, Hector Villanova's got the same last name as a Catholic university in Philadelphia.
What did Harry ever do with Hideki Irabu? You remember that?
Well, you know, it was Hideki Irabu, and then there was Hideki Irabu, and then backwards it was Uberai, and, you know.
Well, hey, let's hear Bill Walton real quick, if you can do some Bill Walton.
Well, Bill, I actually got to interview Bill Walton, and for the Spurs documentary, if you guys ever get a chance, the Ring of the Row documentary, go on YouTube and check that out. It's an interview I did with Bill Walton. Walton was great, and he talked about the fact that here's Manu Ginobili getting inducted into the Hall of Fame from Bahia Blanca, Argentina. And I interviewed him one time, and he goes, what we have here tonight, Bill, between the Denver Nuggets and the San Antonio Spurs is the biggest game in the history of Western civilization.
Yeah, he did that.
And, of course, I've always done Howard Cosell. I've done Howard Cosell for a number of years. I remember when Howard Cosell was doing Monday Night Football. And one of the things he did when he did Monday Night Football was drink himself into a comatose state. One night at Franklin Field in Philadelphia, the Eagles playing the Giants. Now, look, there's Pete List, the quarterback for the Eagles. He's throwing up on the sidelines while I'm throwing up here in the booth. That's how it goes sell, everyone.
Bill, you need to do stand-up. You need to go to the Austin comedy clubs, go to Joe Rogan's show, and do some stand-up.
Is there a place in Bernie? Can I get a gig in Bernie?
Let's open one up. Let's do that.
Something.
Bill, we could talk to you for hours, but unfortunately our time is coming to a close here. But it's been great to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm going to come down. I'm going to come down and visit Roland, and Kerry, I bet we work another game together. You never know.
I hope so.
Bill Schoening, the longtime voice of the San Antonio Spurs, also the Texas Longhorns, and, of course, Kerry Barboza, the sports editor of the Boerne Star newspaper. I'm Roland J. Ruiz. Thanks for joining us on the Boerne Brew this week. And until next week, so long, everybody.